Today, we're diving into a huge, hidden flaw in how we're fighting climate change. We're calling it the fortress illusion. And honestly, it's an idea that might just change how you see everything, from the stuff you buy to global security itself. So let's kick things off with a little puzzle. Not too long ago, a really bad drought hit Panama. Now, you think, okay, that's a local weather problem, right? But all of a sudden, giant container ships started getting stuck in traffic jams at sea, shipping costs went through the roof, and supply chains thousands of miles away just started sputtering. So how on earth did a lack of rain in one small country manage to jam up the entire global economy? Well, it's because that one small country is home to the Panama Canal, and that canal handles a staggering 40% of all container traffic moving to and from the United States. The drought got so bad they had to literally slash the number of ships that could pass through each day. And just like that, you've got a massive bottleneck. This one single event is the perfect snapshot of the illusion we're talking about today. And that gets us to what we're calling the fortress illusion. See, that whole mess in Panama wasn't just some random story about shipping logistics. No, it's a symptom of a much bigger, and I mean much bigger and deeply flawed way that we think about climate risk. Here's the core idea. All around the world, countries are pouring billions of dollars into protecting themselves from climate change. Building bigger seawalls, engineering crops that can survive a drought, all that stuff. They're basically building these impressive national fortresses. But here's the problem, the huge, fatal flaw in the design. They're building them as if the climate storm will just magically stop at their border. It won't. To really understand why these fortresses are so fragile, we've got to look at the invisible connections, the threads that link us all together. These are what experts are starting to call risks without borders. The official term for this is Transboundary Climate Risk, or TCR for short. It sounds a bit academic, but the idea is actually incredibly simple. Climate impacts don't stop at a customs checkpoint. They cascade, they ripple across the globe through the very systems that connect us all. So how does this risk travel? Well, think of it as having four main highways. It flows through shared water systems, like a great river that crosses multiple countries. It zips through our global supply chains, just like that Panama drought showed us. It travels through the food we trade internationally. And of course, it travels with people when climate pressures force them to move and cross borders. And look, this isn't just some abstract theory. This global domino effect is playing out in real time, right now, all over the world. Let's go to the Mekong River, which flows through 6 different countries in Asia. The countries upstream are building dams for their own energy needs. Makes sense, right? But those dams change the flow of water and trap vital nutrients, which in turn threatens the food supply and the entire way of life for 60 million people downstream in places like Cambodia and Vietnam. One country's solution becomes another country's crisis. Or think about food. In 2022, this totally unprecedented heat wave just cooked India's wheat crop. To make sure its own people had enough to eat, the government banned all wheat exports. And the result? Global food prices, which were already high, just shot through the roof. And who got hit the hardest? Nations in Africa and the Middle East that depend on those imports. A heat wave in one spot caused economic pain across the entire planet. And finally, people, in Africa's Sahel region, the desert is expanding fast. It's destroying farmland, fueling conflicts, and forcing people to leave their homes and cross borders just to survive. And that wave of instability doesn't just stop there. It creates pressures that are felt as far away as Europe. It just proves, once again, you can't build a wall high enough to stop the consequences of a changing climate. So, if these cross-border risks are so obvious and so damaging, why on earth are we ignoring them? Well, the answer lies in a fundamental design flaw in our global system, something you could call the nation-state trap. You see, the problem is literally baked into the architecture of how we handle this stuff. Global climate policy, the kind run by the UN, is designed around individual countries. The main tool they use is called a National Adaptation Plan. The key word there is national. By their very design, they only care about what happens inside a country's own borders. The whole incentive is to protect your own house and not worry that your neighbor's house is on fire, even if the embers are about to land on your roof. What this creates is a fundamental mismatch. I mean, a huge one. On one hand, our policy tools are all territorial, they're inward-looking. But on the other hand, the reality of climate change is that it's borderless, it's cascading, and it's deeply interconnected. We are trying to solve a 21st century networked problem with 20th century siloed thinking. And hey, don't just take my word for it. The world's top climate scientists at the IPCC, They've been warning us about this. Their last huge report said it plain as day. Climate extremes are causing impacts across national boundaries. The science is telling us the fortress model is broken, but our policies just haven't caught up yet.
Okay, so that's the problem, and it's a big one. But just diagnosing it isn't enough. We need a new blueprint, a new way forward for building real, genuine, global resilience.
The path forward really comes down to a three-part overhaul. First, we have to reform the science. We need the IPCC to create a standard way to measure these transboundary risks. Because if you can't measure it, policymakers will ignore it. You can't manage what you can't see. Second, we have to evolve the policy. Every single national adaptation plan should be required to look at its cross-border impacts, both the risks it's importing and the risks it might be exporting to others. That creates real accountability. And third, we've got to reform the finance. We need money specifically for projects that solve problems across borders, like helping two countries jointly manage a river they both depend on. And this brings us to what is maybe the most crucial shift in how we think about all this. This is not about charity. For a wealthy country, investing in the climate resilience of a country they trade with isn't foreign aid, it is an act of profound economic self-preservation. It's about protecting your own supply chains, your own food prices, and your own national security in a world where we are all, for better or worse, completely tied together. And that brings us right back to our central idea. For decades, we've built our climate defenses on this idea of the nation-state as a fortress. But all the evidence is screaming at us. The risks don't see our walls. So the question we're left with is this. In a world where risk knows no borders, can any fortress, no matter how strong we build it, truly stand alone? Thanks for watching.